Good afternoon, everyone. The time is 12:01 p.m. on March 7th, 2024. I am calling to order this meeting of the Election Law Subcommittee. We have two bills that we will be discussing today. There was an additional bill that was listed originally that we're going to hold. The two bills for today are House Bill 333 and House Bill 471. So why don't we start with House Bill 333? And I do want to mention for members that this bill has completely changed by amendment. So if you're getting any emails or anything about this bill, it has completely changed. So all I ask is that you just listen to the current version of the bill so that we can just operate off of where the bill is now. So in terms of House Bill 333, election law, election disinformation on large social media platforms and influence related to voting, as amended, I'm just going to talk about the bill has changed so much. We're just going to talk about the amended version. As amended, it requires the State Board of Elections um, to basically take a look and create a portal so that there can be some reporting on its website about election disinformation. It requires that large social media platforms actually take action when they become aware of election misinformation and they take certain actions in order to counter it. I'm going to ask Stan to go through and give us a more detailed update about the bill, but it has completely shifted from how it came in.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. With the amendments, the bill requires the State Board of Elections to take certain actions to counter election disinformation on large social media platforms. So it would be SBE that would be requesting that large social media platforms remove election disinformation. They would also provide correct information to people who might have been exposed to the disinformation to the extent that they're able to do that. It also requires, as Madam Chair mentioned, for the State Board to maintain a voter suppression action portal on its website that the public could use to report election disinformation and voter suppression activities. And then SBE could make referrals to the state prosecutor as appropriate. And then there's also a provision that's retained in the original bill that would clarify an existing prohibition on improperly influencing a voter through the use of intimidation or bribery. So that's essentially it. I guess the important thing to remember about the amendments is that there are no longer any requirements on large social media platforms to do anything with respect to election disinformation, and there are no penalties on social media platforms for anything related to election disinformation. The bill as amended just requires SBE to basically, when they become aware of election disinformation, to notify the platform that the disinformation is there, request it be taken down, and then make some effort to put out correct information either directly to the people who may have been exposed to the disinformation or to put correct information up on its website. So that's essentially the bill. And then they're also gathering information from the public on election disinformation and voter suppression activities, and then making referrals to the state prosecutor as appropriate. They review those reports and then make referrals. So those are the amendments.
Thank you so much, Stan. And I know that everyone got the amendments pretty much yesterday or last night. So let's really go through this. I want to make sure that we all fully understand. So number one, SBE has to create a voter suppression portal. Let's talk about what is that going to look like? Is that just a website? Is that something that people are going to log into? I'm going to ask Mr. Demarinis, when we say a portal, I know it's not your bill, but if you're instructed to create a portal, what are we expecting that to look like?
I would see. I believe it would be some sort of like system where a voter could upload like a PDF or some sort of snapshot that can be then with their information where they saw it, on what platform they saw it, so that we can investigate. It would be, I would say, I think like something that the state prosecutor kind of already has, and something that we currently use for waiver requests, where a person can kind of, go online, kind of like a Google form type of deal, fill in information, allow us to kind of get and have them upload any content that would be used for the investigation, so that we can then review the material and contact the social media platform to, if it does rise to the level of election disinformation, to request its removal at that point there, and then have the ability to contact or post something on our website refuting that disinformation. So I would then think that we would probably promote that portal through our social media platforms as well.
Got it. So Stan, under this bill, members of the public or the large social media platforms are tagging this disinformation and putting it in the portal? Who is uploading this into the portal under the bill?
It's open to the public, but I suppose the social media platform could report it as well. But any member of the public could report disinformation to SBE through the portal.
Okay, and then SBE gets that information and they do what? They investigate it, each one, and refer some to the state prosecutor?
Yes, I believe so.
All right. Any other parts of the bill that we need to talk through?
There's just on the amendments on C2 in the amendments, it's state board is misspelled.
We'll fix that. Thank you, Jared.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure. I don't know what that Borat is.
We'll make that technical adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, lots of hands up. I think I saw Delegate Griffith and Miller first. So Delegate Griffith, why don't you start?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of questions for clarification's sake and to understand one of the mechanisms. So when we're talking about misinformation, right? I mean, let me get to the root of this, right? Because there are some things that have been said that was misinformation that was proven to be misinformation. There are some things that at a time was misinformation that turned out to be true, right? So how do we determine what is misinformation at one point? I mean, and to give examples, right? Like in 2020, people were getting thrown off social media platforms saying that COVID came from a lab, right? And now we know that's actually true. But in 2020, that was considered misinformation. So how do we suss some of this stuff out?
So it might help to just read the definition of election disinformation that's in the bill. So it says it means incorrect or misleading information about election procedures, election results, or voting rights in the state.
I'm sorry. You're right. I read that. I'm sorry. Stan, I apologize. That was the old version. I'm sorry. I apologize. You're right. I got it. No, you're absolutely right. I guess the one last clarification piece, and again, Stan, absolutely, I'm sorry for that. Mechanisms around election results, is that still in the bill as amended?
I'm not sure what you mean. I mean, if you made false, if it was a false statement about election results, it would be considered election disinformation. Is that what you're referring to, or is it something else?
Right, because what I'm trying to get at is like, both sides over the last two elections have made claims that the results weren't legitimate of the election, right? A lot of Democrats did in 2016, a lot of Republicans did in 2020, and that cuts both ways. How would we define that? Because is it something as simple as, well, I can't believe this person won the presidency, or this person stole the election, or this person won because of the Russians, or this person won because of, a bunch of ballots were stuffed, or whatever the false accusation is. Like, how are those statements considered that? And I'm trying to figure out, is just like, because I think for someone, again, I don't agree with any of those statements, but people have a First Amendment right to say that, and saying that after an election doesn't really interfere with the election, right? So because it's after the election, so I'm just trying to understand, like, how does that get sussed out with this? Or am I way overthinking it? Which is possible.
I mean, would you like me to take a stab at that, Madam Chair, or would you prefer
Stan.
someone else respond?
Thank you, Stan. Yes.
I think it would, since this is SBE's determination, I think it would have to be, they would be making the decision as to what constituted election disinformation, because the obligation is on them to do something about it. And I think it would have to be something that would be within their purview, that they would have direct knowledge of. So I think it would have to be something about, the way the election was run in Maryland. And someone said, well, the election was stolen because there was a ballot box was stuffed or a ballot machine malfunctioned or something, and SBE knew that that was not correct because they have various procedures and monitor the process and everything. Then I think they would have the obligation to counter that disinformation. So I think it would have to be something a bit more specific about the process, and that something SBE knew was not correct. But maybe Jared has a different take on it.
No, Stan, I agree with you on the that it would be Maryland specific. Sorry, Delegate, I didn't, but it would be Maryland specific on that front there. And the election results would have to tie to Maryland. And, I guess at the end there, if there was any sort of information about it, I would just, if we do declare that to be disinformation, one of the things would be we would just provide accurate information on the platform there with the information that this person was the winner. The other portions of it, we would notify them of the large social platform of election disinformation. I guess at one point here, Delegate Griffith, you were talking about is if there's any sort of incorrect or misleading information about election equipment as well, that I'm not sure if that would fall under procedures, but we could, but it would just be election results would be tied to Maryland.
Now in a situation where, I'm sorry for taking this, I just want to vet this just a little bit, just to make sure I'm clearing the language and everything. So, like, for example, so somebody says that, makes an accusation and somebody dropped off 100 ballots at a ballot drop box. Would you automatically declare that misinformation? Would you have somebody just verify that and then say this didn't happen? Would there be a chance? Because what I'm worried about is, and we know these things are exceedingly rare. I'm not stumping on the fact that this is a constant problem, right? But if somebody does observe something that may happen, because it does happen from time to time, typically small scale, right? But if it does happen, I don't want people to be discouraged from reporting if they do think there's something legitimately negatively happened. So if somebody made an accusation that they witnessed something invalid, would you automatically deem it as misinformation, or would you look into it and then declare it if it turns out to be false?
Madam Chair, do you want me to answer that?
Yes, please. And I'm
Sure.
just trying to log into another computer with my technical difficulties. But
No worries. So, Delegate, in order to, I guess, to make it incorrect or misleading, I would have to kind of review the allegation. So it's not automatic at one point there. So, if it's a person that's saying, a person just dropped off 100 ballots or stuffed this ballot box there, we would have to kind of understand, what was misleading about it. There would have to be some sort of review of the process, and in order to correct the record. So it's not automatic, I would say, or, as soon as something comes across into the portal that it's dispositive or as election disinformation, but a review has to take place. And that review then also would be a part to see if it's rises to the level of, I would say, criminal violations, which would then have to be referred to the state prosecutor's office. I think that there's a difference here, which is just misleading or factually incorrect information being, I would say, posted or transmitted across the social platforms here, but do not rise to a level of violation. So during the review process, that's also being weighed as well. So if a person says, all Democrats vote on Wednesday, the day after Election Day, that would rise to a level of violation of the law, which we would send to the state prosecutor's office, not just, say that that's just election disinformation and take that down.
So just be very clear, this does not affect political speech, only the nuts and bolts of the election process. And so an example would be like in 2006, I believe a robocall went out on election day saying, hey, this candidate has the election in the bag. Don't worry about coming out to vote. That would be something affected by this bill, not just people sharing their opinions and thoughts on the election, just the actual election process.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, exactly right. Which is why that's why it's called the voter suppression action portal, so that it would cover more of that as well.
And I appreciate you giving me a little wiggle room on this, Madam Chair. I got a lot of folks calling me, and I want to make sure that this is very, very clear to everyone watching and paying attention to this, that this is not dealing with political speak. This is dealing with the nuts and bolts of the election itself, the actual election process. So thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jared, for answering my questions. And thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Delegate. I wanted to check to see if you're able to hear me on my normal computer. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. I'm back in action. Okay. All right, let's go to Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I had similar questions as Delegate Griffith, but the other question I had was about the portal. Would someone have to identify themselves when they uploaded the information?
The bill doesn't say that they do, so I would think that it wouldn't be required.
So it
But
could be
it would
anonymous.
probably be up to SBE to make that decision.
Okay. And then when you said you're going to put the information out on that people to it, how would you know that? Is it only because like this is where the person saw it, or there's nothing about like data or privacy or like people clicked on this information, so I'm going to send it to them?
I'm afraid we couldn't quite. I think part of your question got lost because of the screen froze for a
Oh.
moment. I'm sorry.
The connection, yeah, I saw the connection go. That's okay. So how are you going to present the correct information? There's no like data tracking or we saw this many users saw the post or whatever it was. How would that happen? How do you give out the correct information then?
Right, and maybe Jared can respond to that, but it is to the extent practicable that they can identify people who may have received the election disinformation, and then they can also just put it up, the correct information up on their website just for the general public to view.
Yes, so that's pretty much
Okay.
it, which would be one, it would be on the on our website, whether it's through our rumor control page, or I would say we would probably make some posts or anything like that on what information that was out there. If it's something that rises to the level of I would say a violation, we would work with the state prosecutor's office to get as much information as possible, or the social media platform as well, to kind of work with them on that front.
Okay, if it was just like, okay, we're correcting this misinformation, but it wasn't like an intentional violation, would you still be tracking the users that saw the information, or only if it goes into like a criminal case?
Well, I think I'm sorry, Jared, but
I was like, we're not tracking anybody. I just wanted to make sure about that.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
sorry, Stan, go.
yeah, no, I mean, I think that SBE's obligation to correct disinformation applies regardless of the intent of the speaker. I mean, if there's a disinformation out there, you want to correct it, but they're not going to refer anybody to prosecutors unless there was an intentional intent to deceive and suppress people's votes, which is already a crime.
Right. Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Miller. Let's go to Delegate Feldmark, then Delegate Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to clarify, is there any requirement or expectation here that SBE is monitoring or identifying the disinformation, or is it all just sort of complaint driven through the portal?
Chair,
Sure. Yeah, it would be complaint driven. I mean, we don't have the resources to monitor every
Right.
social media platform out there.
Right.
So this is kind of allowing people to understand that if they do, it's like if you see something, say something type of area
Right.
here, and this is kind of like a portal in which they can then upload that information directly into us, so that we can then review it and correct the record as the trusted source.
yeah, and the language of the bill is as soon as SBE becomes aware of election disinformation, but there's not an affirmative obligation for SBE to go out looking for it.
Okay. So, I mean, I think, Mr. Demarinis, you spoke a little bit already to the process of, reviewing complaints that would come in through the portal and, determining what actually met the standards. I guess, do you have, like, how are you feeling about what you anticipate is likely to come in through the portal? Because I am a little bit concerned, even though this is very narrowly tailored to, misinformation about the election itself. I do think there could be sort of political speech concerns where someone feels, and not necessarily, trying to misidentify, but someone believes information is being presented inaccurately on issues as opposed to about the election itself, that those things could still get sort of submitted to you inappropriately, and potentially with a lot of inappropriate complaints to weed through. I mean, I don't know what you're expecting in terms of workload and how equipped you feel to manage that.
I would say that this is probably something that would, the workload would probably be increasing, especially as we get it. You're right. There would probably be a lot of, I would say, complaints just on both sides, just kind of inundating the portal a little bit here, because everyone thinks that either that it could be they might have felt that their voting rights might be suppressed rather than it actually was. So there would have to be some sort of the review process, and that would be a manual process with a person. So there could be a need for additional, I would say, personnel on this to help with that, to go and wade through some of the complaints and posts that we would receive. So I would say that I would think that this would be coming as volumes would increase. This is not something that would necessarily stop after an election as well. This could be during the awful times, because that's where disinformation and mistrust in the electoral process begins. So it's not like, oh, this is just going to be an election year problem. It's going to be an off year problem as well, because that's how it spreads and changes people's perceptions of the electoral process.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Right.
Thank you, Delegate Feldmark. Delegate Roberts.
Hi, thank you, Madam Chair. I really, Jessica, I think we're on the same, I'm sorry, Delegate Feldmark, I think we're on the same wavelength, because that is the question that I was going to ask, because so you technically, well, you really just answered it. My other question about it is, I mean, do you, I mean, I just feel like this, I feel like this bill opens the door, or this language, and I don't know how to fix it or whatever, but I feel like it opens the door to so many ambiguous you know, issues with determining what is going to be, you know, disinformation. I mean, you know, whether it's during election season or not. And I'm just wondering, you know, is there some, is there another way to address, how is there another way to address it? Or, you know, I don't know. I just think that if, how do you make it so that it is not that much of, because to me it seems like this is going to be subjective. The complaints are going to be subjective, and I guess that will be up to the state board to, you know, determine what's needs to be referred and what not. But that's just my comment on it. But yeah, I mean, you already answered the question, but that was my concern, is that it opens the door to a lot of stuff that may not necessarily need to be addressed. So.
Thank you, Delegate Roberts. Delegate Fair.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And I really appreciate it. I think if we remember during the testimony, during the hearing on this bill, one of the concerns that was raised, or one of the issues that was raised, was specifically that there was at least one documented incident of folks sharing through social media the wrong election date, that was then causing individuals to potentially not be able to practice their constitutional right to vote if they were following that misinformation. So I think the intent behind the language is correct. And Stan, or Jared, I'm sorry, either one, just to clarify, that's really the heart of what we're trying to get at. We're not trying to get into the whole political speech or, for, you know, any of that. We're getting into specifically discussing what is the election procedure, what is the election results, and what are the actual voting rights in the state. So if somebody says something incorrect, do I have that clear? That's the only three things that Jared will be looking at.
That's correct.
Okay. So let me walk this through. So we are only talking about, by way of definition around election disinformation, we're talking about election procedures, election results, or voting rights in the state. So perhaps under election procedures, let me just give an example that we've all been using. If I start posting all over my Facebook and my Instagram and everywhere saying election day is Wednesday, May 15th, I'm posting that all over. Stan sees it, he screenshots it, he uploads it into the portal for SBE to take a look at in terms of election disinformation. The actual social media site does not, under this bill, I don't think we're able to perhaps legally require them to take an action. I don't know. But under this bill, they're not required to take an action. Facebook, Instagram, I've been posting this all over. They're not required to take a specific action under this bill, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, SBE receives the complaint, and then they are then required to notify the platform, and hopefully these platforms will take some kind of action against me posting that everywhere. SBE is required to provide accurate information to the large social media platforms so that they know that election day is actually May 14th. The SBE can request that the platform remove the disinformation, so remove the disinformation that I've been putting out there. And SBE can also make an attempt to inform the people who are impacted by me saying that of the correct information. So perhaps they just put it on their website. Perhaps they decide to run an ad saying, hey, everyone, election day is actually May 14th. And they can post corrective information on their website under the portal and review. They can review me for prosecution if I am attempting to violate laws related to voter suppression. So it sounds like this is a way for SBE to become more timely aware of misinformation that's very specific in these areas, procedures, voting rights. If I say, if you have a conviction, you cannot vote in the state of Maryland, stay home. That is incorrect. And that could really suppress the right to vote, and that would fall under the definition under voting rights, under my understanding. So that's where it sounds like the bill is. I think it was a lot to wrap our heads around, so I just wanted to walk through that example of how it would work. Is there anything that I'm missing in terms of, in that example, Stan or Mr. Demarinis, in terms of what would happen under this bill?
I think you got it all right. Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
I do want to go back to the capacity issue, Mr. Demarinis, because it does seem like there could potentially be a lot of these types of investigations. So can you just talk more about how your office would be able to do all of these things and respond to them and try to get the correct information out?
I mean, right now it would be a manual process. I mean, we would have to go through it because we would have to make sure that there is a review about it to see what exactly is misleading about the statements. And I mean, the examples that you gave are kind of easy, right? It would be easy to kind of say, you know, a person with a felony is not eligible to vote. We would be like, no, that's not true. This is the law, and kind of post that again. But some of the stuff might be nuanced where we would have to kind of, you know, do a little bit of, I would say, review and research on the matter to see what was being alleged, what was, especially if it's a misleading statement, to kind of correct the record there. So, you know, I would say that, you know, as this moves forward here, you know, an additional resource would always be welcomed. I'm never going to turn down additional resources as you go through this here. Throughout bills. And you've championed me in the past for getting additional resources. So I've always, I'm a firm believer in that, because like I said, I believe that this is a portal that's not just, yes, the volume is going to increase in the election, but it also will continue post-election as well. You saw that with some of the defamation lawsuits against voting equipment manufacturers, and so this is not just an election year problem. This is going to be, I believe, an active portal throughout once it starts to operate.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And you are a wonderful administrator advocating for additional resources and people to help with this. Completely understand. Delegate Griffith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the work on this, and I appreciate Stan and Jared and all your work and explanations on this. And the intent of the bill and what it's seeking to do as amended, I support. But as we listen to this conversation, we start going down the rabbit, like just in Harford County, last election, Jared's probably familiar with this, we had hundreds of people showing up to Board of Elections meetings to make complaints. And that's people willing to do that in person. Now you give people an online portal that most people won't necessarily understand exactly how narrowly tailored it is, and start making complaints about anything to do with an election. And, you know, there's lots of people out there that aren't as collegial as us here in our subcommittee and committee in here in Annapolis. And I could see this very quickly, very easily, as word gets out about this portal of complaints of all types coming in from all different directions that all have to be vetted. That will only escalate as we get to the election, and the time when the Board of Elections is most busy being inundated with these. And some of these, obviously, the intent of this is to stop election misinformation. So there's going to be a time sensitivity to some of these things as well when this matters the most. So I could see this, you know, really getting out of hand really, really quickly. So I would love to see this get worked on a little bit more and figure out a way to do it that doesn't get out of hand, or at very least contemplates what the fiscal note would be, because I think state board elections is going to need significant resources to be able to implement this properly.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Delegate.
ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, any other comments on this bill? Okay, I think we're going to hold on to this for the moment. We may come back to it. I'd like to go to our next bill to make sure we get to that one. I know we have a busy day in committee today, but we may come back to it in this meeting. So let's pause on House Bill 333 and go to House Bill 471, which has a great, amazing sponsor. Election law, post-election procedures. This bill makes changes to the process of certifying the election results to comply with the Federal Electoral Count Reform Act of 2022, which includes establishing an earlier deadline for state certification. There are amendments to the bill. I'm going to ask Stan to explain the amendments.
Sure. So the amendments just specify a process when a member of a local board dissents from a certification of results. The current law just provides that they should provide a statement on the record for the reasons for their dissent. And the amendments just provide a process where the local board would investigate if there was some sort of irregularity in the process in consultation with the state administrator. And then the state administrator would submit the dissent to the state board of canvassers to make a final determination as to whether there was actually some irregularity or not. And then the final determination would be put on the record at the state board.
Got it. Delegate Fair.
There's one more amendment, which reduces the number of days for the state administrator to transmit from 30 days to 3 days, because that was a misprint on the original bill. Sorry, Stan, my apologies.
No, thank you, Delegate Fair. Appreciate it.
30 days to, can you repeat that?
From 30 days, it was supposed to be 3 days, because that's the correct. Okay. Yeah, 30 days was a misprint.
All right. Any further discussion about this bill? This is really one that just brings us into compliance with federal requirements. All right, I'd like to entertain a motion on the amendments.
Move favorable.
Second.
Okay, the amendments have been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the amendments? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of the amendments to House Bill 471, say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed?
Aye. Sorry.
In support, Delegate Roberts?
Yes, aye,
Okay.
in support. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. The ayes have it, and we have added the amendments to House Bill 471. Now, on the bill as amended, let's take the motion, and then we can do further discussion if needed. I'd like to entertain a motion on House Bill 471 as amended.
Move favorable.
Second.
All right, it's been properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion on House Bill 471 as amended? All right, seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of House Bill 471 as amended, raise your hand or say aye. Any opposed? All right, House Bill 471 moves forward as amended. I believe we may be voting on this one in full committee today since we have a scheduled vote session. So with that, we'll just hold on. We do have a little bit of time before crossover, so we'll hold on to 333. Definitely chew on if you have any additional questions. Please do see myself or Stan, and we may come back around to it next week. We'll probably meet perhaps a little bit earlier, maybe on Tuesday, to keep pushing some bills out ahead of crossover. So thank you everyone for the thoughtful discussion as always, and we will meet again soon. See y'all at 1 o'clock.